My name is Maya, and for 3 years, my love story with Daniel was the stuff of modern fairy tales. We met at a conference, and the connection was instant. The only problem was that we lived 500 miles apart. He was a consultant in Chicago, and I was a writer in New York, but we made it work. Our relationship was a whirlwind of weekend trips, late-night video calls, and the constant, thrilling anticipation of our next meeting. Daniel was perfect. He was thoughtful, passionate, and he understood my soul in a way no one ever had. His job was demanding, requiring him to be on long-term projects, but he always made me feel like the center of his universe. "Just 1 more year, my love," he'd whisper over the phone. "After this big project is done, I'm requesting a transfer. Then it's just you and me, forever." I believed him with every fiber of my being. For our 3rd anniversary, I decided to do something special, something bold. He was supposedly in the middle of a grueling 3-month project in Chicago, staying in a corporate apartment. I booked a flight to surprise him. I imagined the look on his face when I'd show up at his door, a perfect romantic movie moment. The morning of the flight, I was buzzing with nervous excitement. I landed in Chicago, the city that was supposed to become my new home, and took a taxi to the address he had given me. It was a beautiful, upscale apartment building in a quiet, leafy neighborhood. My heart hammered in my chest as I rode the elevator up to the 12th floor. This was it. The rest of our lives was about to begin. I stood in front of apartment 12B, took a deep breath, and knocked. I heard the scuttling of small feet, then a woman's voice, warm and tired. "Just a second!" The door opened, and a woman who was around my age stood there, a toddler clinging to her leg. She had kind eyes and a welcoming smile that faltered when she saw me. "Can I help you?" she asked, a confused frown on her face. I was equally confused. Maybe this was a co-worker? A roommate the company had assigned him? "Oh, I'm sorry to bother you," I said, my own smile feeling suddenly stiff. "I'm looking for Daniel Peterson. I'm his girlfriend, Maya. I came to surprise him." The woman's face went completely pale. The warmth in her eyes vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, gut-wrenching shock. She slowly shook her head, as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. She looked at me, a stranger on her doorstep, and said the 6 words that shattered my entire world. "I don't know who you are," she whispered, "but I'm his wife." The hallway seemed to tilt, the air growing thin and cold. "His wife?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Number, that's impossible. We've been together for 3 years." The woman, his wife, just stared at me, her eyes filled with a dawning horror that mirrored my own. She opened the door wider. "You'd better come in," she said, her voice a hollow whisper. Her name was Sarah. The apartment wasn't a temporary corporate rental, it was their home. The walls were covered in family photos, wedding pictures, photos of a pregnant Sarah, pictures of her and Daniel holding their son, a beautiful little boy named Josh. The life I thought he was building with me, he already had with someone else. Over the next hour, sitting in the living room that should have been a symbol of my future, we pieced together the horrifying tapestry of his lies. It was a masterclass in deception. To me, he was the consultant on a long-term project in Chicago. To her, he was the consultant whose biggest client was in New York, requiring him to be there for weeks at a time. He had 2 phones, 2 email addresses, 2 separate, meticulously curated lives. My weekends with him were her boys' trips. Her family vacations were my work crises. Every romantic memory I had was suddenly poisoned. The beautiful watch I'd bought him for his birthday? He had told her it was a corporate gift. The emergency trip he'd taken to see his sick mother was actually his anniversary trip with me. We were 2 women, living in 2 different cities, in love with 2 different versions of the same man, and he had been playing us both, perfectly, for years. The most sickening part was realizing how he'd used our own lives against us. He used my independent, busy life as a writer as an excuse for why we couldn't talk more. He used Sarah's life as a stay-at-home mom as a reason he needed to get away and focus on work. He had found 2 women who trusted him completely and had built a prison of lies around us. Both, As Sarah and I sat there, two strangers united by the most intimate betrayal, a new emotion began to replace the shock and heartbreak, a cold, hard rage. We weren't just victims. We were the only two people in the world who knew the complete truth, and we were the only ones who could bring his entire fraudulent world crashing down. The plan was simple, and it was brutal. We didn't want a quiet divorce or a simple breakup. We wanted to expose him, to strip away the carefully constructed identities he had built. We wanted him to face the consequences of his actions, publicly. According to his schedule, he was due back in Chicago from his New York business trip in 2 days. Sarah told me to stay, to hide in the guest room. The wait was agonizing. 2 days of sharing a home with the woman whose life my boyfriend had been living, both of us suspended in a state of quiet, simmering fury. He walked through the door on Friday evening, a bouquet of flowers in his hand, and a tired, loving smile on his face for his wife. "I'm home, honey," he said, dropping his bags. "Welcome home," Sarah said, her voice steady. "We have a guest." I walked out from the hallway and stood beside her. I will never forget the look on his face. It wasn't just shock. It was the look of a master puppeteer who suddenly realized his strings had been cut. His carefully separated worlds had just collided with the force of a supernova. He tried to lie, of course. He stammered, tried to pretend I was a crazy ex-girlfriend, a stalker. But we were ready. Sarah just calmly placed 2 phones on the coffee table, his work phone and his home phone, and played a voicemail from me on one and a voicemail from her on the other. His own voice, speaking the same loving words to 2 different women, echoed in the silent room. That was just the beginning. The next morning, Sarah and I, together, sent a single, joint email. It went out to his entire company, from the CEO to the interns. It also went out to his parents, his siblings, and every single one of our mutual friends. The email was simple. It was titled, "The Two Lives of Daniel Peterson," and it contained screenshots of texts, flight confirmations, photos, a complete undeniable timeline of his 3-year affair and his secret family. We laid his entire deception bare for the world to see. The fallout was absolute. He was fired from his job for moral turpitude. His family was horrified, his friends disgusted. He lost everything, not because of a single affair, but because of the sheer sociopathic scale of his lies. I went back to New York a few days later. My heart was broken, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had lost the man I thought was my future, but I had gained an unlikely ally in Sarah. We still talk sometimes, 2 survivors of the same shipwreck. He didn't just break my heart, he showed me how strong it could be. And I walked away from that wreckage not as a victim, but as a woman who had taken her power back, and who would never, ever let anyone write her story for her again.